All right.
You should be able to see when it's a go. Okay.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's episode of the Roundtable here on the Grayson Network. My name is Danny Ellyson and I am your host, and today is February 10th, 2021. Good Lord, we've made it thus far. Look, folks, as we kick off the night here on our Roundtable, we're going to talk about a lot of our current events. We want to talk about the impeachment and the process that's taking place there, and obviously Biden's really convenient executive orders and the plethora of them folding out. Staged insurrection, and who does Bill Barr really work for? Not to mention the assault on our freedom of speech through mega mainstream communication platforms. So tonight, I'd like to start with Derrick Grayson. Let's go straight into it. Let's open the show talking about this impeachment that's taking place.
Well, Danny, one of two things is going to happen. The Democrats have vowed that they will do what's necessary to ensure a conviction. While they have not released the details of that, we know that they need, I've heard 60 votes and 67. Alex may be able to address that with specificity. So I don't know how they would meet that threshold. The only thing I can think of, as with Kelly Loeffler, when it was put out there about Donald Trump inciting violence, her saying, well, yeah, I'm going to now vote to certify because of the information that's been revealed. So there may be some.
Hold on, Derrick. Let's make clear, in the opening of this entire thing, you said Democrats, but I want our viewers to understand that this is a bipartisan effort by way of the letter behind people's names.
I'm getting to it, yeah. So we know 6 Republicans, alleged Republicans, already voted for the trial. My point is, to meet that threshold of 60 or 67, whatever that number is, after they have done their presentation, because there is one Republican who said, I changed my vote because the Democrats laid out a great case. So my point is, there may be a great case for having a trial. My point is, there may be some more that may flip and say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and vote for this conviction. Again, I don't know what their game plan is, but Hank Sullivan put out there that they will do whatever is necessary, even if it means violating the Constitution, in order to get this conviction. And if that's not going to happen, if Rand Paul in all of his wisdom now is saying 0 chance, then we know, Danny, that this is nothing but thespianism at its finest. I yield.
Great word to introduce the show tonight, thespianism. It's been a while since I've heard that one thrown around in public. Alex Johnson, coming to you. Here we are. This impeachment is underway. You're a lawyer. So I want you to share your thoughts, and then, of course, we'll extend to you your opening statement.
Well, the impeachment, there isn't much I haven't said before about the impeachment, and the fact that it really isn't something that is anything other than political theater. Like, that's what's going on right now, is political theater. The Democrats want a pound of flesh. And when I say Democrats, I include those Republicans or alleged Republicans that voted to move forward with an impeachment. I mean, when you look at what actually happened, I mean, this just is showing the lack of education of a significant portion of society, and thinking that what Donald Trump said arises to anything criminal, because that's the whole point of what a impeachment should be about. Is it's about criminally holding a president accountable, or a justice, and ultimately what President Trump said. You can read the transcripts, you can see what he said. He did not order anyone to commit criminal activities. He did not conspire with anyone to commit criminal activities. He did not tell anyone to commit violence. And from a legal perspective, that's what I would hope, and what my understanding of the law is, to hold someone accountable for their speech in this country, is the idea that someone actually needs to advocate, like directly advocate violence. And that isn't what went on here. What went on here is the Democrats don't like people who supported Donald Trump. They don't like Trump supporters. And they want to make the idea that anyone who supported Donald Trump and was involved in supporting Donald Trump is somehow guilty, if not guilty directly by committing some sort of criminal activities, guilty indirectly by supporting the president. And I think that that is the type of thought police, the type of bullying from a political party, which goes right along with everything else that the Democratic Party has been pushing over recent years. I mean, that includes the whole idea of cancel culture, the whole idea that you know, if you say the wrong thing or have the wrong idea, you don't get to discuss the idea or discuss competing viewpoints. You get shoved out of the public sphere. And that is what this theater is designed to do, is to somehow marginalize people who supported Donald Trump, and ultimately to marginalize Republicans so that Democrats can keep getting elected. I mean, there isn't much legal underpinning what's going on. I mean, I don't think they really care about the legality of it. I understand that President Trump's attorneys are, you know, arguing some constitutionality arguments, but that it's, I mean, ultimately, I think this will be decided directly on politics. I think what Derrick said is much more apropos to the circus we have going on in our national political scene.
Well, I thank you for that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we're all kind of surprised that Trump's even got attorneys, that there's attorneys out there still willing to hold to the law. I mean, we did see a pile of 18 of them discharge their oath to represent the law. Catherine Bernard, coming to you, same question. Here we are on the eve of ongoing impeachment trials and actions. And the flip here, what is your opening statement to our viewers, especially here in the state of Georgia?
Well, I have to admit, I'm calling in from the state of Virginia this evening, so apologies for not being on video, and apologies for not watching any of the impeachment this week at all. So I have been talking to a lot of people about it, though, and unfortunately, I have to say, things are not looking good for Trump in the court of public opinion. And so that's what I think Republicans need to be more focused on. They need to be focused on how everything is playing to, you know, the masses, for lack of a better term, because I've seen countless people talk about how seeing the insurrection from the perspective of the congressional representatives made them realize how scared they must have been that day. And I'm thinking, that just means there was an absolutely masterful presentation by the lawyers who were hired to edit the video and put it together in the way that looked scariest. Because let's be honest, if anybody wanted to put together a terrifying video of people being hurt or threatened during protests from this past summer, from summers previous, they could easily find them. And, you know, yes, it's true. Something happening in a political building in the halls of the US Capitol certainly provides a more cinematic perspective. But again, you know, congressional representatives are voting to drop bombs on people. They are voting to have no-knock search warrants kick in people's doors. They are voting for mass incarceration. They are voting for cruelty. They are voting for debt that is going to enslave our grandchildren and their children. And so for them to sit there and say, oh, I was just so terrified because a protest came into a public building, I'm sorry, but we have got to push back on that narrative. And it's not about Trump and what he said or didn't say. You know, it is, you can say, no, he never said anything that specifically incited a riot. And I would agree with that statement. But you could also make the argument that when he says, oh, we need to fight and this and this and this, that he is telling people that he disagrees with the election results. You can make that argument. And I don't think that Republicans need to need to fix themselves on the idea that Trump did nothing wrong and that Trump's behavior was beyond reproach. That's the wrong place to be focusing our attention. The place to be focusing our attention is the idea that citizens entering a public building constitutes insurrection. That is a hugely dangerous precedent to set, and it is one that if we carry it out, any kind of occupation of a public building is going to be considered illegitimate. Yes, we do have to look at the fact that there were people engaged in physical violence and dangerous activity, but you're going to see more and more connections from that to very suspicious organizations, like the lawyer who was arrested today by the FBI for potential involvement in organizing. He's somebody who worked for the FBI for years and years and years, and now he's being identified in news articles as having a consulting firm that does classified work for the United States government. When people who have that kind of resume are being charged for participating in insurrection, we need to take a very hard look at the narrative. And again, not from the perspective of defending Trump, not from the perspective of defending a Republican Party that has just failed on every level to answer any threats to the legal regime, any threats to election integrity. They have just completely failed to answer that. We need to address this from the perspective of First Amendment rights to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. And so as long as the conversation is about how frightened these congressional representatives were, and not honestly how frightened they should be at what they are doing to this country, both parties, we need to take the power back for the people versus the government, rather than letting them tear us apart into supporting, one politician or the other. Honestly, they're probably all impeachable. They have probably all done things that you could consider incitement to illegal activity or incitement to immoral activity. Well, and so I'm just horrified by the entire situation, and I think the moral high ground has to rest with the people, and we shouldn't waste it certainly on Trump or any individual politician. We have to challenge this narrative that people assembling, even when it gets out of hand, that people assembling on public ground, that constitutes insurrection.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And Kathy, you bring up a very valid and beautiful point. And that is, folks, a lot of us were Trump supporters, and a lot of us were Trump haters and bashers, and whatever the case may be. I think the conversation is moved beyond former President Trump. I think we're at a stage now where we're talking about liberties. We're talking about the freedom of the American people, and we're talking about the definition of the law of the land and the power that our Senate and Congress have to either enforce and write the law and or circumvent it for personal gain, such as, and I want to stay with our panel at this time. Josie, I'm going to come to you in just a minute, but I want to go back over to Alex Johnson for a minute. We've got an executive order that was signed by the Biden administration on January 27th. And I want to read this verbatim as to what it is. It says that this executive order directs agencies to make decisions on best available science and evidence. Best available science and evidence. That sounds like an appealing executive order. It sounds like something that is simple that we would all support. But in the interim, the definition of acceptable science and acceptable evidence has been compromised in federal agency all over the Fed. What say you, Alex?
I mean, I think that and I'm not overly familiar with that particular executive order, but from what you read, I mean, yes, it absolutely sounds nice and something that would be picked up on by media to be a positive, happy thing. Like, oh, we need to follow science. But part of the question is whose science are they following? And I think that you alluded to that in that, if they start saying that, yes, I mean, men should be running in women's sporting events, or that, we need to make our decision to end all oil-based fuel in the United States because of science, it's a very dangerous idea. I mean, I think that part of the problem with the political left in general, is their desire to try to act as if their experts can control everything, that somehow the answer to every question is through science. I mean, that's how they justify locking people down in their own homes and keeping them away from their family members that are dying from various ailments, and saying that it's due to COVID. I mean, these decisions, the idea of just trusting everything to science, completely undermines the concept of a representative republic. Politicians and the people should be the ones determining how they live their lives, not a committee of scientists. I mean, it reminds me of the Obamacare debacle and the whole idea of government panels determining when you should receive medical care or not. I mean, that is what the case is in some other countries, and I don't think that's what we want here. So that is my concern with the executive order, is those terms are all very broad, and the application is likely to be dangerous.
Absolutely agree. I mean, I might not be the most educated individual on the planet, and I've taken a couple science classes here and there, but nowhere in the science classes did I establish a budget or how much money I should spend on health and things of this sort. So Josie, coming over to you, back on the executive orders, we're just going to trust science, right? We're going to trust, as the executive order said, best evidence. So we've got another executive order that comes out, signed on February where are we at? February the 2nd. So February the 2nd and February the 4th, massive executive orders pertaining to the United States border. Okay, so all this stuff coming out of the border, folks, if you're not paying attention to this is some scary stuff. So the first executive order on February 2nd, Josie, was begin ending the Remain in Mexico program and restore the U.S. asylum system. Now, this executive order, the reason I'm not reading the whole thing, is 12 pages long, but it basically undoes everything the Department of Homeland Security, local Texas Rangers, and other federal law enforcement agencies, state agencies, everybody have done at the border. It undoes the wall, it stops the wall, all of that, and essentially says, FEMA, open up our borders, open camps. They're all asylum seekers until they get due process as though they were an American citizen. Josie, talk to me.
Well, we can see that the left, the communists, like I call them, I don't even call them liberals anymore. I call them just straightforward communists. They don't take a break on their work. They want to destroy us from within, not only with our internal enemies, but from those ones who are coming from abroad. Last 2 days ago, I believe, 2 days ago, they catch 4 Iranians crossing the border on the south border, I believe, on the state of Texas. They were crossing the border illegally from Iran. So each one of us need to make our own, go back and think, how do they get into Mexico, these people from Iran? And as we are seeing this kind of detention on the border, we can see from other countries from the south part of the continent too, they are going from Venezuela, from Bolivia, from Ecuador, from Chile, to Nicaragua, Costa Rica, from Central America, that they don't require a visa for those countries to open up their airport and let them come in, and then they get together with these caravans who are being promoted. There is one on our way, promoted by the Democrats, so they can come to the United States. And basically, we're going to see the consequences of these illegal aliens coming into the country, because the minority communities in America, the black community, the brown community, the poor community are going to be affected by this invasion. That's how I call it. I call it invasion.
I think you're onto something there, because there's a negative executive order, and I want to stay on this topic. It's important that we all discuss this in honesty and transparency. But there's several executive orders that happen in this period that pertains to the border. One of those being that now they're rolling back all of the programs which I'm not necessarily against, making sure that we reunite broken families and separated families, but in the legalese and the verbiage here, any child that is currently in custody through Department of Homeland Security of anything of the sort.
But let me interrupt you right there. Those are separation of children. They don't belong to those people they separated them. Those are children who came with other people who are not their family.
Which were either abducted or stolen or being sold into select slavery.
Or kidnapped or sold out. Yes,
what exactly. The executive order does is it invites the actual parents from foreign nations to come here and petition asylum here in the United States. So now it sets the precedent that if somebody wants a way here to seek asylum, then all they do is give their kid to somebody else that gets in trouble. They bring them across the border.
It's always they always look for a loophole to violate our laws, to violate our way of living. And basically what I wanted to get to the bottom is the minorities in America, those ones who are legal here, and those ones who are Americans, like the browns, like the blacks, they are going to be the major one to be hit by this invasion. Why? Because they're going to come here and they're going to take the little opportunity that we're going to have during this Democrat communist administration. Look, a lot of jobs already are being lost. There is a lot of people who are losing their way of living. So who's going to be taking those jobs from us? Those people. So what the government is trying not only to force us to go and get dependent on the government by forcing the brown and the black to go and apply for food stamp, Plan A, all this good stuff that they call, but they are forcing us to go and depend on the government. Plus, they are bringing those people from Central America or from other countries who are crossing Central America with that mentality. So basically what they are doing is they break us. They're trying to break us one way or another. And I don't want to sound like I hate my people. No, I don't hate no Latinos. I don't hate no Hispanics. I want them to come here, but legally, like I did. I did it on the right way, on the legal way. And I want they to become like I am, because I do not want them to be the next labor slave in America, by bringing down our wages and breaking our families, basically. That's what it is.
And Josie, I don't disagree with much that's discussed here on this panel, but when I do, I tend to insert foot into mouth. But I'll tell you what, in the way that this is going and how history has shown us, I would argue that this is not going to be the brunt of Blacks and Hispanics and brown people that deal with this. I think that they've escalated this, that slavery was not abolished. It was simply distributed equally amongst all of us that are not elitists. Derrick, Grayson, coming to you about executive orders. And as we're staying on this topic, I want to talk about this abortion conversation. I'm trying to find the words without cussing on TV, folks, but this abortion rollback that's happening, where Biden and Kamala Harris are restoring federal funding to abortion agencies and rolling back policies that gave states the authorization to make bans. What say you?
Well, what all can I say other than to just stand up on a soapbox and wail against abortion? We knew that was coming. Donald Trump, and I have said this before, Danny, he ran on a number of issues before being elected, probably 12 to 15. And I listed them from one of his TV commercials and print ads. Only 3 were passed: tax reform, criminal justice reform, which wasn't listed as one of those. But I remember the speech he gave in Chicago where he said, I'm willing to do something about the criminal justice system, and his famous quote, "What have you got to lose?" And of course, trade. However, defunding Planned Parenthood, that didn't happen legislatively, along with all of those others. Yeah, he signed a bunch of other little legislative agendas, okay? But those bills are things that not much fanfare is done about it. We don't hear about it. But abortion is one of those issues. And I have said this before, take away all that I am, former candidate, et cetera, et cetera. When it gets to what's left, brass tacks, I think the only thing that matters in this country is the fact, Danny, that this country has legalized the killing of our children. And if God judges us on anything, it will certainly be that, because we have made it legal to do so. Trump gave us a stopgap with an executive order, but I lamented constantly. You people don't understand that you're being betrayed by your rhinos in the House and in the Senate, because if Trump does not prevail in the election of 2020, every executive order that he has signed will be wiped out with the stroke of a pen. And I've got the videos and the Facebook and Twitter posts to prove it. So, Danny, for me as a Christian, nothing else matters at the end of the day except the killing of our children. So if we can't see that killing our children is wrong, none of this other stuff that they're doing is wrong. And that goes in line with what Abraham Lincoln once said. If slavery ain't wrong, nothing else is wrong.
I would agree with those sentiments. Alex Johnson, coming over to you, shifting topics a little bit. If you'd like to double tap on anything that you've heard, Alex, feel free to do so. I want to talk about the staged insurrection. So media reports are coming out left and right, some on the mainstream, a lot in the private. Obviously, a lot of us have seen the videos ourselves and know people that were actually there at the Capitol that can dispute a lot of the mainstream data that is taking place. Derrick Grayson being one of those. But I will tell you that this insurrection topic seems to me to be the excuse to say, if your government is scared, you need to be more scared than you ever have before. And staged insurrection is what scared them and is now allowing the hostile takeover of what we call freedom.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I saw a little while ago, and Catherine's absolutely right with her comment earlier that regarding the government officials, like the narrative of them being scared is definitely a dangerous one, and one where we need to move to the greater question or the greater concept that, the government is responsible to the people. Like we aren't there to serve them. And the idea that the government is scared, it comes to mind an article I read a couple of weeks ago that talked about some of the people that were arrested at the Capitol, and that a lot of them were people with no previous criminal records. A lot of them were middle-aged and professionals that were arrested. And it brings to mind the idea that it's possible that a lot of the people that were there for the protests, and this isn't agreeing with the narrative being put out by the media or anything else, but the people there for the protests, a lot of them are, I think, we're probably just fed up with the government. And I mean, I think that to a large extent, I mean, you look at some of the protests over the past years of various issues in society. I mean, a lot of these politicians aren't doing anything to serve the people. I mean, they go up there, they put on a theater, much like I talked about earlier with the impeachment circus that's going on. And they're up there not really representing the interests of Americans. I mean, you see them do tax breaks for certain special interest groups that lobbied the government. You see that in Georgia. I mean, taking it local for a few minutes. I mean, our so-called Republican House Speaker, David Ralston, who isn't really Republican, spent his time attacking people like Matt Gertler, who were advocating for constitutional carry, trying to get bills passed that would support our constitutional rights, let people not have to get permission from the government to carry a weapon concealed. And what does David Ralston do to that person who's supporting a Republican principles? He tries to support primary challengers to him. Democrat primary challengers running as a Republican. I mean, that's the type of thing that the politicians are doing. So you look at Washington and you start talking about this, the insurrection, or the, like, you know, I don't like the term very much, because I mean, at best, it's a number of trespassers who terrified politicians. And I think that a good bit of that is that the politicians, you know, when you really look at it, people are annoyed and angry that politicians aren't doing anything. And then you have the perception, right or wrong, that Donald Trump was doing things. And it leads to anger, even from the left, when you look at the fact that, I mean, the Democrats, Bernie Sanders was essentially cheated and scammed out of the nomination twice on the left. And you see that happening, and then the left's mad about it. So you really need to look at the bigger picture here, which is that our government is not really being responsive to the needs of the people, but is being responsive to those who donate a bunch of money and lobby the government very strongly. So, I mean, I don't think that what happened in the Capitol is anything that needs to be repeated or is somehow a good thing. But I do think it's a message, and I think it's a message to all of us that the general population in this country is very annoyed and frustrated at the lack of representation that we are getting from politicians who claim that they are supportive of the people, and then in the end they do the opposite.
Well, Alex, I'd agree with you. I think the greatest insurrection of my lifetime that I've witnessed is this path to forced vaccinations. Catherine Bernard, coming to you. I mean, you were mentioned in this conversation. Let's follow up there. Let's talk about what they're calling staged insurrection, this game that they're playing with the minds of American people. And dare I suggest what other countries and our fellow brothers and sisters in the human realm are thinking of this nation at this point around the world.
Well, Danny, you say playing games with the American people, and I have to say again, there are just so many people who are playing those games. So it's just hard to single out any one person. I did want to mention the person I mentioned earlier, the lawyer who had previously worked for the FBI who's been arrested. His name's Thomas Caldwell. And apparently the government is accusing him of being a member of Oath Keepers, but he is denying ever being a member of Oath Keepers. So I think, again, that's a really good sign that there are, you know, psyops is a strong word, but whenever there is violence at a protest, and y'all heard me say this about the protest this past summer, that agents provocateur are often responsible for actual violence and destruction. Most of the people who show up at a protest, you know, they're there like Derrick and Hank Sullivan. You know, they showed up to hear somebody speak, to show support for, you know, a politician that they like or an idea that they're concerned about. You know, they're not there to destroy anything. They're, you know, they might get caught up if someone else does something, but who is the someone else who does something? And as somebody who has participated in a lot of protests, organized protests, represented people for, you know, who are charged after protests, I have to reemphasize that when people are proposing or engaging in violence, it is very likely that they are deliberately provoking that, whether it's because they are, you know, some black bloc Antifa person, or because they are, you know, a right-wing FBI agent who is trying to undercut the validity of the protest itself. So be very suspicious. And I think honestly, the term staged insurrection, there's a lot of truth to that right now. And as I said before, I think that's our most critical purpose right now, is keeping the American people as a whole from associating the idea of dissent with insurrection, because it just continues to amaze me how we spent 4 years glorifying the resistance, you know, hashtag resistance, not my president, you know, let's go have a march on Washington. And I support having a march on Washington. I support resistance. I support dissent. And that's what we need to be doing with politicians. But to watch how quickly that evaporated as of November 4th was truly frightening. That the same people who were standing up for the right to assemble even when it produces potentially violent or dangerous results. The same people who said, our country is worth it. We were born in struggle, and, quoted Frederick Douglass about the value of agitation and depreciating people who wanted crops without rain and the thunderstorms. Those same people now are clutching their pearls. And yes, I will use the phrase clutching their pearls over the fact that a group of rowdy and unruly citizens streamed into the Capitol and, made a mess of things. But did they fire any weapons? No, the weapons that were fired were by police. Remember, one of which was at an unarmed woman, a veteran who was shot dead. So again, we're not talking about people who, went in there with, weapons or mortars. You would, if they had gone in there with weapons, you would constantly be hearing about the armed mob, but you're not. They are working to create the insurrection narrative out of whatever they've got. And what they've got are, they're one guy with the Confederate flag. You've seen probably hundreds of pictures of that one guy with the Confederate flag in the Capitol, which I agree, that's not a cool thing, but it does not seem to represent the entire protest, the entire effort, even the entire group of people who entered the Capitol that day. So again, I think on one of these previous discussions, I brought up, the sword of Damocles and the old story about, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And there's a reason for that. So this idea that politicians who engage in violence and subject other people in violence can then somehow act scandalized when their unpopularity leads people to enter public buildings and try to confront them, well, they're not being honest about the way that they are using force themselves. And so we really are, this is a truly overused term, but we are at a crisis of legitimacy right now, and not in the sense of something that's partisan. This is way, way, way beyond Republicans and Democrats. We are at a crisis of legitimacy of what it means to be an American. We're even interpreting the Constitution differently. And so I still think that's got to be our priority, not defending any particular politician, but unwinding the narrative that says people who showed up at their nation's capital to protest are the enemy of the people.
Catherine, you said a lot in that bit, and folks, I just wanted to let Catherine Bernard go because she was on point. It reminds me of the old National Guard saying that I fired the shot that built a nation. Back in 1636, that was a statement that could be made with pride in defending a nation and being able to build a nation state that we all found to be free, protected by our Constitution and our rights, our love for one another. But now the table is turned. The shot was fired on us, the American people, veterans, and somebody lost their life in the Capitol that was unarmed. Granted, there were some people that did some crazy things. Maybe storming the Capitol is a bad idea. Shouldn't do that. But they make it sound like it's something that it's not. Catherine Bernard also mentioned PSYOPs, being that the crowd being infiltrated by way of agents of whatever organization. I'm not going to go on a limb and surmise my opinion, but it was obviously infiltrated by agents of different organizations that were there to spawn the activities that took place. I don't think that freestanding citizens, especially there on that occurrence and at that time, would have carried those things out. PSYOPs is real. Infiltration of agents into our society is very real.
Well, I'm sorry, Danny, can I just interrupt real fast for one clarification? I appreciate your patience on that. I do want to point out, mob violence is a real factor. People in groups make different decisions than individuals do. And so, we are lucky to have the perspective of Derrick Grayson on this call, somebody who was present, who did not, end up going into the Capitol or anything like that. But I do think we have to acknowledge that there is a difference between, the folks who showed up and heard a speech and were present on public grounds. Not everybody used physical force or did any damage. And there is a line there. And I do think we want to encourage a general sense of accountability rather than blaming everything on PSYOP. So I just wanted to make sure that I was not suggesting that anybody who did anything bad was working for the government. It is true, mob violence can cause people to make bad choices.
Absolutely. Scientific fact. I mean, mob mentality exists. It's real. But mob mentality is brewed by a source. And that source is what I'm identifying. So I agree that everybody's accountable to their own actions, as I am mine, and all of you are yours. But it doesn't change the fact that there was somebody out front caught on tape that made it very clear that they were there to agitate a crowd intentionally to benefit one side over the other as a direct attack on the American people and our liberties. That being said, shifting over to our next topic, Derrick, Grayson, the assault on the freedom of speech. We're watching Twitter, the likes of Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and a ton of other organizations start dumping people based on their interpretation of their belief. It honestly amazes me that I can still host this show and see every one of y'all's faces. I have no idea why we're still on social media with the people that they're taking out. Derrick?
So, Danny, over the last probably 3 or 4 years, I have taken the time to condense down the overall character of what I call tyrants. I've talked about Nero, Caligula, Vlad the Impaler this week. I did Che Guevara or Guevara. Vlad and Che, those two, Danny, they are revered after the fact because of one or two things that people think about them when they weren't even there. But these tyrants are murdering bastards. And what I try to explain to people, and I'll use Che in this example, his quest for social justice, that's admirable. But it knew no bounds. And that's the rub, because he became a murdering bastard. If you didn't agree with him, he had you killed. That's a part of silence. What we see here today, and I posted a meme, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, and one other, Facebook, Twitter, Apple, Google. I think they've got an acronym for it, but it escapes me. They are the modern day tyrants when it comes to speech. And the tool of tyrants is silence. So now we don't see people attacking you with bow and arrows, sticks and stones. You know, we don't have the KKK doing night rides. None of that stuff. We have moved into another realm of silencing the people. And the whole point of silencing the people is for control, so that they can do the things that they want to do and get you into the point to where you won't go to a gathering anymore, because a gathering will be considered insurrection. That's where they want to drive you to under the black codes. If you were black and unemployed, no more than 2 or 3 of you could be gathered together on a corner. Okay, that was actually a law, all right, in the South, born out of Jim Crow and the black codes after the compromise of 1877. So these people are moving us there, and we are allowing it. The only reason we don't have an Idi Amin or a Lenin or a Stalin is because too many of us still have guns. That's it. So they have to finesse this. And there's a scripture, Genesis 3:15, that talks about the subtlety of Satan. Satan will find a way to get you in the position where he wants you. And he has done that masterfully with conservatives and their support for rhinos. Ain't much I can say about Democrats, especially a black woman about the life of a child in the womb who says, I voted for Joe Biden with every fiber of my being. That is the subtlety of Satan. I yield.
It's a hard one to follow. Who's next? Josie, you're on the table. Let's talk about the assault on our freedom of speech. You got to unmute yourself, Josie.
The assault on our freedom of speech is essential for submission and control agenda. That is a must. It's essential. It depends on living, being alive or die for those people who are in control. What I'm seeing this week was I was horrified for what I watched yesterday with the impeachment. What I watched all these days about the First Amendment, specifically the last part of the grievance. For example, Anthony Holcomb, he collected signatures requesting the resignation of the Secretary of State and the governor because of the fraud going on during election time. And he's just putting a grievance in there, and they come back and they sue him back. So we are at the moment that not even executing our right of complaining or not agreeing with something. It's like they're putting us like we are committing a crime. Are we in that situation now that even complaining, you cannot complain because you are a criminal now? So it's essential for them to control the first, and after that they're going to go for the second, which we already are seeing the result of the House when it comes to the bills that they are being passing against our Second Amendment. So what happened is with the impeachment, they are distracting us here, and nobody's putting attention on what they're doing with the Second Amendment. With those bills that they are passing against us. So it's all a manipulation. And this is what happened not only in Cuba, in Nicaragua, in Venezuela, it's happening here. And we are getting distracted. And these Democrats who are calling themselves Republican, actually the chairman from the Clayton Republican Party, he just called me that I am a rhino, because I am pretending to be a Republican because I don't back up the Republican Party 100%. I was telling the person I am more than a Republican. First, I am a Christian. Second, I am American citizen, and I follow the Constitution. And third, I am a Republican, because we need to go back to basics. So it's a lot of things that is confusion, communist propaganda. They are attacking us from every angle. There is a lot of confusion. There is a lot of hopeless, but also a lot of people are hoping for something to happen so they don't move and they don't do nothing. I mean, it's the same movie that I watched before, but in English now. It's so sad for me and depressing. Because
Josie, you bring up some good points, and I hate to cut you off. But at the end of the day, those that sit back and simply watch are complicit. Yes. Those that wake up their neighbors, hold their hand, and lead them in the promised way to the promised land, and defend innocence and defend righteousness are those that can call themselves able, willing, and righteous.
How are we allowing senators violate the Constitution? They're supposed to be uplifting and upholding the Constitution, and what they did yesterday, it was like they beheaded the Constitution and put it in a silver platter, and gave it to the communists in this country. That's how I see it. It was horrific. It was I felt like it cannot be. I mean, it's incredible that me coming from another country, from a third world country mentality of control and submission, I would never thought that I would see that happen in America. And it just happened not only on the 20th of February of January, on the 6th of January when Pence did what he did, but also yesterday was like the completely beheading of our Constitution. So my question next is, I mean, I know I'm not dreaming. This is not even a nightmare. This is the reality. And Americans, what are we going to do? Are we gonna go alone to get along?
Josie, I'm hopeful, and I think that there is more room for humanity than the current present discussions may allow us to consider and think about. Alex Johnson, coming to you. The attack on our freedom of speech.
That is honestly some of the most the concerning thing going on is the attack on the freedom of speech, because there's two things that people need to remember, or one thing that's critical to dividing is that the First Amendment is not freedom of speech. I mean, yes, it protects the freedom of speech from government intrusion, but it is not. It doesn't create freedom of speech. We have that right naturally. That is something we are born with. That is something that the First Amendment of the Constitution enshrines as being protected from government interference. But what I think many people have forgotten or not realized is that that is different than the freedom of speech that we should all individually be advocating. Going back to what Josie pointed out, is that what are we going to do about it? Well, what we have to do about it is to stand up individually for our God-given right to freedom of speech, and not to just say, well, because I've heard this argument a lot. People say, well, freedom of speech is something that's just the First Amendment, and if a private entity wants to shut someone up, that's fine. I mean, yes, a private entity is perfectly able to shut people up and not to allow the people on their property or whatever else, but that doesn't mean that's a good thing. It isn't right if, for example, at the Republican Party conventions, that are coming up this year, and everyone should be involved in that's Republican, it's not good if the Republican Party said, all right, well, you aren't allowed to say certain things at a microphone. Like that's not a good thing. We all intrinsically know that's not a good thing. I mean, even if someone gets up and starts talking about things I disagree with, like if someone starts advocating pro-choice positions at the Republican convention, I mean, yes, that's not Republican, but that doesn't mean the person needs to be dragged outside. It means that I need to get up to a microphone and talk about how that person's wrong. And I think that our society has become so afraid. Individuals are so afraid of losing their jobs or being shamed at school or being treated badly because of their positions, that it is influencing people's behavior. It's making people have to be silent. I mean, as Catherine pointed out earlier when she's talking about the Capitol, I mean, yes, all of a sudden, all of the sources of information are suddenly calling it an insurrection. They're all saying that it's some violent. I mean, I heard people say it is a coup that happened in DC. It wasn't a coup. People didn't have guns like going and threatening to like a plan to take over the country. That isn't what was going on. I mean, a coup would be President Trump ordered the military to take over. That's what you see in coups in other countries. But here, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, if you are supporting Trump, you're somehow someone advocating a violent revolution. And that isn't what anyone is advocating, at least no one that I know. And I think that's where freedom of speech, I mean, we all have an obligation to stand up for freedom of speech. And I mean, I know it's easier for me than many because I have my own business. So I am not, I am not really as worried about getting fired. I mean, my clients, I think, all believe in freedom of speech, but that luxury isn't something that a lot of people have. And I think that's the greatest threat to freedom of speech, is people being scared into submission.
Josie, I see your hand up, coming to you.
Yes, I believe that one of our biggest problem as Americans is that a lot of us are living in denial. Now I understand what Cubans and people from Nicaragua, when they were living in Venezuela, they used to tell the Venezuela, hey, be careful, the communist is coming, you're going to be, no, that's not going to happen here. This is what we used to say back in those days. No, we are not Cubans. We are not Nicaragua. No, that's not going to happen. And it happened. So now today, I understand the feeling that those people had back in those days when we used to reject what they were telling us. Be aware, wake up, be aware. This is the same thing is happening here in America. And I'm going to point it out only Georgia, okay, because that's where I live. It's not happening here. No, that will pass. No, we are more, it's not only the denial, but it's arrogant and pride. Those three elements are helping the communist agenda to achieve what they need to achieve here in Georgia. So instead of we going back forward and walking forward with Martin Luther King agenda, it's like we going backward now. I'm seeing a plantation mentality, like you cannot talk, you cannot say this. That's why I'm putting on my Facebook page, I am loud and nobody's gonna make me shut up, because I see a lot of people being scared. I see a lot of people don't. I put a simple poll. Who do you think out of 17 people, who do you think would be your next governor? That poll is being viewed for over 4,000 times and only 10 people voted. That tells you a
Right.
lot.
And Josie, I want to stay on topic where we're at, moving towards the back end of our show. And I value your opinion, your insight. You have an insight that none of us have, coming in secondarily, obviously, from another country into the U.S. to guarantee your citizenship. And so for that, we value you and we thank you for your commentary and coming to the table and opening our eyes to things that maybe we haven't considered. Catherine Bernard, coming back to you, the assault on our freedom of speech, censorship, big tech, what say you?
Well, this week, my Facebook page apparently did something wrong. They didn't tell me what it was, but I got the notification that it is in danger of being unpublished and it is no longer being suggested to people. I guess some people might be saying they're no longer subjected to it, but on my page, I really don't even post any election integrity issues. I keep that on my personal profile. There's really very little that's controversial at all. I had made a post criticizing the drug war, and their Facebook is, saying I'm a bad citizen. So I think we are seeing the beginnings of the social credit movement that we're already seeing in China, where people's ability to buy a train ticket or a plane ticket, et cetera, where that is constrained by their social credit as decided by whatever institutions. Now, again, I do think that as long as these are institutions that we choose to do business with, it's unfortunate certainly when they make decisions based on bad information or make decisions we disagree with. But as long as we have the freedom to choose not to do business with them, ultimately that's up to us. The issue does come in when there is government power at play. And Facebook, with the way they donated $6 million to Fulton County elections alone, certainly cannot claim to be independent of government. And so I think the rule we need to set for ourselves is if a company is engaging in some sort of behavior that is, if they are censoring, if they are discriminating on the basis of the content of speech, because of course, everybody's entitled to discriminate on the basis of the content of speech. Some speech is better than others, some speech you want to listen to, some speech is correct, some speech is lies, some speech is truth. So there's always going to be some level of discrimination in speech that is entirely appropriate. But when you are looking at viewpoint discrimination, where it's not a matter of, are they saying something obscene? Are they saying something violent? But when you would say, accept violent statements about protests from this summer, but not accept violent statements about protests from this January, or the other way around, then that is a problem. And so when there is an entity engaged in that kind of viewpoint discrimination, I think we have to look very hard at any connections to the government and coercion. Are they receiving any tax money? Are they receiving any subsidies? Are they receiving any specific defined public benefit where they need to be treated like a public university or some other, legitimately public institution? And so that's I think the question. We still have to be very careful. We don't want to be snowflakes. We don't want to suggest that every platform has an obligation to present every piece of speech that we like or agree with. That's not the case. People are always going to disagree. And that's why it's so important to have the freedom to participate in multiple forms of discussion. And frankly, it's of course a lesson to all of us that we should not be so dependent on any one particular platform. There's a lot of different options out there. And I do think that, as constitutional conservatives who support personal responsibility, we cannot be in the position of saying, oh, you didn't let me say what I want, to anybody who is not exercising coercive control over us through the force of government. It has to be a matter of building our own opportunities and platforms and ways to speak to people, because the First Amendment right is not to force your speech on somebody else. It's that the government cannot censor speech, religion, assembly, petition for redress of grievances, etc.
Well said, Catherine. Thank you. And folks, for those of you out there that are looking for a social media platform to be on and you're concerned about your accessibility, go ahead and shoot me an email at dannyellison@gmail.com. Send me your address. I'll show you what it's like to receive a letter in the mail. Coming back to you, Derrick Grayson, Bill Barr. Who's he really working for?
Globally.
I knew that was going to get you, Derrick. Come on, let's get it on. Come on.
Listen, man, I'm going to tell you. I was fooled by Bill Barr. I was fooled by Jeff Sessions. I was fooled by who else was in that list? William Barr. I thought that they were the good guys going to do the honorable work. That was not the case. And I won't take credit for this. I'll give it to a guy. He calls himself, his YouTube channel is called Steele's Report. Probably one of the most straight-laced, straightforward guys that I have seen putting it out there. He does the research, pulls the information together in short, succinct videos. And he laid it out. He said Bill Barr all along has been working there, a duplicitous rhino. You've heard me say that before about rhinos, pretending to do the job. Trump gave us a tidbit of that when he let it be known that he was upset that William Barr didn't tell them about the investigation of Hunter Biden. That was the first sign. Mike Pence, Trump let that out when he was here in Georgia last, when he said, assuming Mike Pence does the right thing. But he's a good guy, kind of turned it into a joke. These people have behind the scenes been working against Trump. My only disappointment is that they were not exposed sooner. Now, understand something. I always talk about people who don't expose rhinos, who give them cover, like Fox, Hannity, Pirro. They singularly blame one side, the Democrats. And, people don't like me because, I will point that out. But this is the reason why we are where we are. And when we give cover to these rhinos who pretend, making them the most dangerous politician in America, because they purport to be one thing and they are something else. And I thought it odd that Joe Biden walked into office and in the first week had signed upwards of 20 executive orders. Now, everybody was going on and on about they were blank pieces of paper. No, these were executive orders that had already been completed by Bill Barr himself. That is the disturbing part of this. And Trump trusted them. Now, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and put it out there, and people can get mad at me. I don't care. But, you know, I keep it in the middle of the road. All of this Q stuff that people are bombarding me with, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. Even your own Marjorie Greene got up there and bent the knee and disavowed everything she had ever purported to believe about Q, going as far as calling him a liar. So what does that say about that? People better start waking up and seeing the distractions for what they are and who the real enemies are, those within our midst. I will yield. I don't know where Danny went. Looks like we may have lost him. So I'll give him an opportunity to come back.
You guys
and what
can't
we
see me or hear me?
Oh, man, you know what? I'm losing my mind. I'm getting old. You didn't shift it from the upper right over here to the middle. So, man, don't be doing no musical squares on me, Danny. Oh, you
I don't
me.
control the squares. I'm just the host. So you have to give it your production team.
All right.
Moving over.
Danny,
Alex
that's
Johnson.
all I got. That's all I got, man.
Derrick, we thank you for your contributions tonight. Alex Johnson, coming over to you. Let's talk about it. Bill Barr is now outed that he literally wrote the first 21 executive orders for Biden while Trump was still president. What say you?
I mean, that does not surprise me at all. I mean, President Trump he made a lot of errors in who to trust. I mean, that is something that is a consistent, and I'm saying errors because I'm hoping and I believe that they were errors, because I think that President Trump was sincere in wanting to drain the corrupt swamp of Washington of the political careerists that honestly they just leech off the system. I mean, you look at someone like Bill Barr. I mean, I think he's a leech on the system. I think these people make their money off of politics and political favor. And I think that left I think they're the ones who look like, from someone with substantial business experience, they would look at those people and say, oh, those people are the ones with a resume. They've worked in government. They've worked in politics. Those are the people to put in these positions. And I think that ultimately is a mistake. I mean, the people who work in politics and make money off of and have these long political resumes are the last people you want in positions of authority and power in government. They're the people who likely have the least amount of experience and knowledge on how to make the country work. I mean, if you want good people in office, find people who have run or built companies, or people who have worked hard in jobs throughout their lives. I mean, all of those people are going to be better than the people that live in DC and honestly sort of thrive on the swamp. And I think that it doesn't surprise me at all that Bill Barr is it did that for Biden. I mean, he'd probably do it for anybody paying him in government that might give him a good position or appointment and are close to levers of power. I mean, that's the vast majority of the people that work in government. So, I mean, it's depressing and sad, but it is not the least bit surprising. And I think that in the future, we need politicians who are aware of this and don't put people like that into those positions.
Alex, you're stealing my closing thunder, so I'm going to cut you off, and I thank you for your contribution to the panel tonight. Catherine Bernard, coming to you. Bill Barr, man's working both sides here. What say you?
Well, when Alex says don't put these people into government, who are these people? I would say that lawyers are the problem here. These are the kinds of people you don't want to put into government, and specifically prosecutors. They just are causing trouble all over the place, and never trust one of them, really. And so Bill Barr, like many other prosecutors, he gets people's hopes up. He talks about, oh yeah, I'm going to wrap myself up in the flag and go after the actual bad guys. And yet again, we have no evidence of him going after actual bad guys. And I think we can fairly say it's a pretty target rich environment. So yeah, I'm going to stick with never trust a prosecutor. And just in case everybody else has also seen that video of the lawyer who couldn't turn off the cat Zoom filter, which, I think everybody has sent that to me that I know, really, that lawyer, unfortunately, Rod Ponton, is a prosecutor who used federal agents to harass the woman who broke up with him, had her arrested, and trashed her life for years and years. Reason Magazine did a fantastic piece on it. But yeah, just keep in mind, never trust a prosecutor, and Bill Barr is no exception.
And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, Catherine Bernard won the Daily Double here on Jeopardy. So congratulations, Catherine Bernard. What a zinger. Never trust a prosecutor. Alex Trebet, God bless you. We thank you for all your years to us. Godspeed. That being said, folks, tonight we've covered a lot of topics. We've bounced around. We've listened to all of our panels, but I want to leave you with a couple thoughts here from my table. Not because I'm always right, but because I want to make you think a little bit, just like all of my panelists do. So let's recap and go back to the beginning just a piece. The same people that are telling you that a fetus with a heartbeat is not a human life are the same exact people that raved about having evidence of life on Mars because they identified a bacteria. I'm adopted. I'm going to leave the rest of that right there without going any further. Folks, we also talked tonight about public opinion, the mind of the masses. Well, I want to talk to you about the fact that public opinion is really the proof that systemic indoctrination is real. What happened to village opinion, where you and your neighbors, your family, the people that you know in your community stand for something, believe in something, and you do it because that's what works for you in your little village? But instead, we base our opinion on mainstream. Well, mainstream may not be your stream. So you might want to consider who you're listening to, what you're doing, and who you're allowing to influence you. At the same time, we constantly are caught in this battle of Democrat versus Republican. Well, really, what this comes down to is the deserving versus the undeserving, who is worthy and who is unworthy. They distract us by using letters. Now, I identify as a conservative. I identify as a Republican based on the history of the party. But today, folks, I can tell you that history has shown us that what we're experiencing today has not been written before. So I would ask you to join me in the challenge. I'll drop my R if you drop your D. I've said that on the show before. Will you simply meet me in humanity? Will you meet me in faith? Will you meet me as a man or as a woman? And can we stand for righteousness, to defend life, to defend each other, and to not allow a few to govern the masses? People that are uninformed or underinformed or misinformed, regardless of the category you fall in, are the ones that grant the power to elitists directly to compromise us all. I would ask that if you can identify with being underinformed, misinformed, or underinformed, all three of those things are different. If you identify in any of that at all, reach out to us. Allow us to match you with somebody that can educate you and take you down the right road. Hell, your library today might not even be able to accomplish that. We know the school system can't. We know that the university system can't. And dare I say, don't call your congressman. But there's a good chance that if you reach out to one of us, we can pair you with somebody that will help you understand whatever it is that's confusing. Stop reciting the popular and public opinion. That's what's making you broken. That's what's making you broken. Start having the conversation in your village first. What's happening with your neighbors? across the street, down the street, and around the corner? Is everybody eating okay? Is everybody all right? Is everybody safe? The Bible says that Jesus said, "Fear not, for I am with you." I'm confident in that. And I'm confident in the ability of our people to stand up and be the army that God is waiting for us to be. I'm confident that we have enough heart as fathers and mothers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, children and parents, to defend one another without the influence of what they call the mainstream. Many people have found comfort in defense, but they're broken when it comes time for them to be the one to defend. I would encourage you to reach down deep inside. What voice do you really have if you won't even defend your own? What voice do you have if it is not your own? I would challenge you. All of us here on this panel have our own opinions. We come to one table. We share our opinions. We argue with each other. We bicker. But I'll tell you what, anybody threatens one of my panelists, you will face me. Because this I will defend. From all of us here at the round table. And from me and my family down here in the Low Country. We wish you the best of your health, and we bid you a good night.